What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Diggers podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. It is Friday. That means you got me, Stats, and Michelle Magdziuk is here. What's up, Michelle?
Hey, feels good to be on. I feel like Fridays are just flying now because
Yes.
of the holidays. I felt like I just talked to you. I love talking to you, but I feel like I was just here.
Maybe so, but you know what? I'm here for it. Everybody likes Fridays, including this review, which, by the way, rate, review, follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network, wherever you get your audio pods. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This comes from Texas Niners fan. Spectacular is the subject. 5 stars. This has got to be the most creative sports pod I've ever listened to. Come on, bringing a Steelers fan onto the mix. It's genius. Everybody on the show seems to have the ability to argue with their opinions and ideas and not get mad with each other. None of you guys hold grudges except maybe Levin and Rob, and you keep it playful. This is what podcasts on sports should be. In other words, it is the gold standard. So there you go.
Someone likes it that I'm a Steelers fan. Some people do not.
That is why I wanted you to be a part of the network, because you are not I'm converting you to a 49ers fan, but you weren't at the time.
Yeah, if your goal was to have someone on that's not a 49ers fan, you have now failed because now I care too much.
Are you saying I should let you go?
Well, I can, if Sam Darnold's starting this year, I can start hating them for you.
That'll take care of itself.
Yeah.
So we have been doing our fantasy football preview for the past few weeks. We did quarterbacks, we did running backs. Today is wide receivers. By the way, if you want those, go back in the podcast feed or look on the YouTube page. They're there waiting for you. We will count down the top 10 of all the positions that we've done so far. What is your level of confidence with these wide receiver rankings?
Oh, I don't know. They don't feel great. I'm not going to lie. They're kind of like boring in a way where it's just like, there's a lot of great wide receivers and it's really hard not to put them into the top 10. So getting ballsy is kind of hard. I do have a couple names in here that are higher than I think some would expect or lower than some would expect. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of elite wide receivers right now. So it's like when you're looking at the top 10, these guys should be in it as long as they stay healthy and something doesn't drastically change in their offense, which some guys do have that happening. But at the end of the episode, when I get through my top 10, I want to give my favorite later round wide receiver pick that everyone needs to take in their drafts.
All right. That's going to be interesting. I'm formulating guesses as to who that might be, but we will.
I think you could have 30 guesses and I don't think you'd pick him. So
30.
Well, maybe 20.
Does he play on the 49ers?
No.
All right.
Why would I say you have a ton of guesses and you want to guess if he plays for the 49ers?
I know other things besides the 49ers, Michelle. Okay.
I'll actually quiz you to see if you even know this guy's name. You should know it, but maybe you won't because you're not as big into fantasy in the draft.
Hey, all of a sudden I've been relegated to somebody that doesn't know anything about football.
No, you know a ton. I just don't know if you know like the wide receiver threes on teams, you know?
All right, fine.
You know of the name. I just don't know if you'll get it off the top of your head.
Okay. I can't wait till the end of the show, but let's kick it off with number 10.
All right. I'm going with CeeDee Lamb of the Cowboys. He finished as the wide receiver 7 last year in fantasy points per game, but he had 156 targets. And it's mostly due to the fact that there was really no other wide receivers there. I mean, at one point they brought in T.Y. Hilton to try to help out. And Michael Gallup was still recovering from the ACL tear, didn't look like himself for most of the season. And then Noah Brown, like that was literally like their second go-to guy for a wide receiver. And it just all was CeeDee Lamb. That's why I absolutely loved him going into last year. Like I was super high on him because I knew he had to get all the targets, but he had a 28.6% team target share last year. That was the 6th highest in the NFL. And that jumped up by 10% from the year prior. He only was at 18.8% in 2021. His targets went from 111 in 2020 in his rookie season to 120 in 2021, and then to 156 in 2022. And I still think he's going to be the clear-cut wide receiver on this team, but they did add Brandon Cooks, who is a very, very good wide receiver. He's going to get 100-plus targets as long as he's healthy, and probably more than that. He deserves it. He's one of the best wide receiver twos you can have. Then you have Michael Gallup. Once a guy's a year removed from ACL injury, they normally get back on pace. He was very good before he tore his ACL. And then you have Tony Pollard, who should be on the field more. And that means more receiving work for him. And they did draft Deuce Vaughn, running back. He was like the best receiving back in the draft at 170, whatever pounds he has. But I think his targets will go down a little bit. So I have him falling in the ranks a little bit. He finished as wide receiver 7 last year. I have him as wide receiver 10 this year. He had 7 games with 11 plus targets last year. I don't see that keeping up.
This is what worries me. And you know this about me and the Cowboys. I'm not a fan of the Mike McCarthy, Brian Schottenheimer offense. I don't know why you got to do the voice. That was clearly unnecessary. McCarthy has flat out said, we want to run more. We're not interested in being the number one offense. Like, he is telling you.
Okay, but you can't run more because they don't have any running backs. They have Tony Pollard, and that's it. How are they going to run?
Look, you don't have to convince me. I think it's a stupid strategy, but this is what they are telling you they are going to do. I still think Zeke Elliott may find a way to sneak back onto that roster too.
Please no.
I'm not a fan of what the Cowboys are doing on offense. I do like CeeDee Lamb. I agree with you. He's clearly their wide receiver 1. I'm not worried about Cooks. I think Cooks being there helps CeeDee Lamb more than it hurts because you do need like a viable threat. And your point about Michael Gallup is a good one also. Like, Michael Gallup is a really strong wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, whatever spot you want to put him in. But I don't like what the Cowboys are doing on offense. I don't think it's going to work. I think they're going to be bad. I think there's a reason Mike McCarthy took the job and didn't run his offense because nobody wanted his offense because it stunk.
See, so I don't agree that they're going to be bad. I think Dak Prescott's going to be really good, but I just think they have so many more weapons now. And some might say, well, Dalton Schultz is gone. Maybe some of those targets can go to CeeDee Lamb. I don't really see that happening. Like, they have other tight ends on the roster that they can use. It's not like Dalton Schultz was this like exceptional talent that's like no one can replace him. They drafted Luke Schoonmaker in the 2nd round and then also have some younger guys that were on the roster last year. They can contribute, and I think they all kind of add up to Dalton Schultz's targets last year. So I don't really see those transitioning to the wide receivers all too much.
Sign me 29 watching on my Twitch page at Stats on Fire says professional stats today, glasses and a collar. It took Michelle 2 seconds after we hopped in the studio to say, oh, you got your old man glasses on today.
They are kind of old man glasses.
Why? What is old manish about them?
I don't know. Maybe they're
what would be the young, hip, cool glasses I could have worn today?
Maybe
Please.
It's your skinny face with the rectangle glasses.
I'm sorry that my head is an oval. All right. What do you want from me? I'm one of those.
I think that's why you need like oval, like some type of, curves in your glasses because you have.
I have what?
I like a skinny face. I feel like you just need. They look great on you.
Oh, shut up. Shut up. Let's just get to number 9.
Number 9 is my boy, Garrett Wilson. If I could have him higher, I would. Jets wide receiver going into his 2nd year. Offensive rookie of the year last year. Had 1,103 yards last season with Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mike White. Like, I don't know how much worse it could be for a rookie wide receiver. Like, it's not even like he's a veteran and he knows how to play with different quarterbacks. No, he went into this league and immediately was able to play with any quarterback and some really, really bad ones. So last year, he only had 8 games with 5+ catchable targets per PFF. But in those 8 games, he averaged 99 receiving yards per game and averaged over 20 fantasy points per game in PPR. He had more than 6 catchable targets in just 4 games last year. He averaged 111 receiving yards per game and 22.5 fantasy points in those games. Aaron Rodgers, he might be a lot to handle, but he is a good quarterback and he's an accurate quarterback and he knows how to get his wide receivers the ball. We've seen Devonta Adams we've seen a lot of wide receivers dominate with Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson is a very, very special wide receiver. So I see no reason why he and Aaron Rodgers can't have that similar connection as he's had with other great wide receivers in the past. Just get Garrett Wilson the ball where he could possibly catch it, where it's catchable, and he's going to do special things. It was just atrocious last year.
Garrett Wilson is a stud. I interviewed him before the draft. I love, like, he strikes me as one of those like all business type of guys. He told me because the draft was in Vegas. I was like, what are you going to do? After the draft, it's Vegas. Like, you got to go out and celebrate. And he was like, nope, all I do is play video games and study film. That was it. I was like, I love this guy. I want him on my team. that stat you gave at the beginning was just absolutely phenomenal, just how bad the Jets quarterback situation was. And you're right about Rodgers. Devonta Adams, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson. If he likes you and he has faith in you, he is going to just pepper you with footballs. Garrett Wilson, to me, could have a monster year this year. I'm surprised he's not higher on your list, to be honest with you.
I know. I could put him higher if someone wanted to, like, just keep putting him over. But it's like all the other guys are like top-notch guys. It's really hard to say, like, Garrett Wilson, who we think can be top-notch, who we think can be elite in this league, put him ahead of these other guys who we already know are elite, and they're still in pretty decent situations.
Who was your number one fantasy running back?
Bijan Robinson.
Do we know that he can produce in this league?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Running backs are very different than wide receivers.
Okay, that's fair. All right, Garrett Wilson at number 9. I would love to have Garrett Wilson on my team. The more
someone said you could put him higher. It's your list. That is true.
Find me 2-9, baby. Love it. All right, so we got CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson. Who's number 8?
Number 8's AJ Brown of the Eagles. And Garrett,
this is high for him.
Is it? He finished as a wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game last year. First season with the Eagles. So I have him finishing pretty much exactly the same. And that's like, my analysis is not great for AJ Brown because I don't really see a reason for it to change all that much. He put up 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns last year. He did have 5 of the touchdowns in 2 games. So possibly those touchdown numbers can go down a little bit, but it's AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And those are the 3 guys in that offense, and they're going to get all the targets. I will say, though, with there being 3 great guys, there were weeks that AJ Brown just completely disappeared. He had 3 for 32 yards in week 5, 1 reception for 7 yards in week 10, and then a couple games of like 4 for 46, 3 for 32. Like, there's just some games that he just completely disappeared. And then games he completely went off. He's great to have. And every wide receiver in fantasy, for the most part, is inconsistent. They don't have an amazing game every single week. But it does scare me a little bit with how low AJ Brown's like floor is when you're considering the Eagles offense are so good at running the ball. And if they get a huge lead with running the ball in the first half, they're not going to start passing in the second. So that's just my biggest worry with AJ Brown. I'm putting him right where he was last year because I don't see it changing all that much.
Another year in the offense. Hopefully Jalen Hurts develops a little more as a passer. That could help. But the other thing that's scary is, like, if the Eagles get, inside the 10-yard line, the 5-yard line, like, they're running it in to score with either with a running back or with Jalen Hurts. So that obviously hurts AJ Brown. I think their offense is going to be really good this year. I love Brown. I think we sleep on the fact that, like, oh, it was his first year there. Like, yeah, and they put together this fantastic friggin' season. As much as I hate to give the Eagles credit, I do think that they're a very good offense, and I think Brown, I'm surprised he's not higher up on this list, to be honest.
Devonta Smith is so freaking good too. So he's going to get a ton of targets, a ton of work. And it could be any given game where the defense is focusing in on AJ Brown too much, then Hurts can just go over to Smith. So that's kind of the reason where I'm putting him behind all these other guys. But I mean, this is what I'm saying. All these players on this list are great. So when we're nitpicking being wide receiver 7 or 6, it's like, okay, maybe he could. If I have you ranked as a wide receiver 8 and you end as wide receiver 6, it's like, it's pretty much what I thought.
Well, it's kind of what you thought.
Yeah. But it's not like I'd be like, wow, I was so wrong about this guy,
Very fair. Yeah. Number 7.
Devonta Adams. This one's risky because we know he's fantastic. But we have no idea what this offense is going to look like this year. There's no Derek Carr for the first time in what feels like my entirety of life. Just get Derek Carr out of the league, please. I don't want to watch him anymore. But he's no longer with the Raiders. And now Jimmy Garoppolo, is he even healthy? Is he going to play? I mean, I guess all expectations are that he will. How long will he stay healthy for? Can he make it through a full season? If not,
he cannot.
Aiden O'Connell is going to be throwing passes to Devonta Adams, a rookie out of Purdue, the late round rookie at that. Like, not great. That's not great outlook. But also, they added Jacoby Myers. Hunter Renfrow missed a ton of time last year. He should be back. He's going to get targets. And it was just Devonta Adams last year, and that's it. And he had a great season, 1,500 yards, 14 receiving touchdowns. Awesome. He had 5 games with over 30 fantasy points. It was second most behind only Justin Jefferson. I mean, those are game-winning weeks, and having Devonta Adams was absolutely amazing on your team. He also, just like A.J. Brown, completely disappeared in games. He had 12 receiving yards, 36 receiving yards, 3 receiving yards, 28 receiving yards, 15 receiving yards. That's a handful of games where he was just nowhere to be found. And I don't know if that was Derek Carr or that was Josh McDaniels, but I have a feeling it was Josh McDaniels. Like Derek Carr and him were just like on fire sometimes in the beginning of games, and then they would just go away from Adams completely.
Devonta Adams, I think, is the best wide receiver in the league. He had 9 touchdowns last year of 30 yards or more. 9 of 30 yards or more. A lot of guys don't even have 9 in a single season. He made huge plays for this team. 14 total touchdowns on the year. I don't think that the drop off from David Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo will be that big if Garoppolo is healthy. The problem is Garoppolo is never healthy.
Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Derek Carr. So I'm not even so much worried about that. And it's not like Derek Carr was a big touchdown thrower either. He still wasn't last year, and Adams had 14 receiving touchdowns. So Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr are kind of similar in that way, where they're fine accuracy wise. They make stupid boneheaded mistakes and they throw a ton of touchdowns. Like, that's also a worry with Devonta Adams. I know he put up 14 last year, but is that going to be able to happen again with another quarterback who doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns? I don't know.
And a guy who's going to be hurt. He's going to miss time. Jimmy Garoppolo always misses.
You're already hurt, and they're already questioning your foot. Like, are you really going to make it? Yeah, someone said, "Whoa, is JG better than Carr?" In every single metric in his career. I know they've played in different systems, but good.
Moo. That's Moo. We love Moo. Is Jimmy Garoppolo better than? I mean, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. To be honest with you, for where you're going to have to draft Adams, and considering the fact that Aiden O'Connell is probably going to play if history holds, I don't know if I would be willing to make that leap, even though
that's why he's 7. He could be. Listen, if you wanted him to be the first wide receiver off the board, fine. Like you said, he's maybe the best wide receiver in the league, at least top 3. So wherever you want to draft him, I could see him finishing as a wide receiver 1.
Right.
I could also see it being a disaster of a year. So that's why I kind of have him here at wide receiver 7, because I am a little bit worried about how this Raiders season is going to go.
You want consistency and you want predictability, especially when you're talking with your high draft picks. So I get why you have Adams there. All right, so we are through 7. Let's go at number 6 now.
All right, number 6, Jamar Chase. Chase. I know. In the ADP, he's the wide receiver 2. So I do have him a bit lower here. So if he were to end as the wide receiver 2 and I had him as the wide receiver 6, that would be a miss. That would be too low on him. But he was a wide receiver 4 fantasy points per game last year, wide receiver 5 in his rookie season. So I actually have him possibly having the worst season of his career by 1 spot. But his yards per reception went way down last year compared to his rookie season, which was predictable because he just started on fire. He was like averaging 22 yards per reception for the first half of his rookie season. And then that ended up coming way down in the second half of his rookie season. But then even in the second half of his rookie season, he was still averaging 15.1 yards per reception, which was down from the 22 in the first 7 weeks of his rookie season. But last year, it was only 12 yards per reception. That's way, way down. Hopefully, it can increase a little bit again. I mean, he's talented enough to be targeted deep. He's talented enough to get so many yards after the catch. But they were using him a bit different last year. And they have so many weapons. I know it's like the same weapons they had last year, but I still think they need to get T. Higgins more involved. And he was dealing with his own injuries last year for a big chunk at the beginning of the season. And then you have Tyler Boyd, who's still there. They added Charlie Jones, who's a talented wide receiver. By the way, Charlie Jones was Aiden O'Connell's favorite target. So I don't really know why I just brought that up.
I was like, okay.
Okay. I was just like, wow, I'm talking about Purdue players a lot here. But anyways, Higgins missed 3 of the 9 games that that Chase went off last year. So that still means that Chase had 6 great games with Higgins on the field. I don't think he's going to have as monster of a year if T. Higgins can stay on the field all year, if Tyler Boyd's there, if Burrow has been the most consistent, his efficiency has been off the chart. If that just comes down a little bit, I just don't think that Jamar Chase is a top 3 wide receiver this year. And I have him a little bit lower than the other guys. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with 13 or fewer PPR points last year. And when you're drafting a guy this early, he only played 14 games. So if he had 5 of his 14 games with 13 or fewer fantasy points, that's being really, really inconsistent.
I think what happened was Jamar came into the league and people were stunned with how good he was. And they was like, oh my God. Then that offseason happened. Everybody was like, we can't let Jamar Chase get deep. He's too good. So defenses adjusted and forced him to go shorter routes. And that's why his yards per reception went down. Now we have to see okay, how are the Bengals going to adjust to what defenses did last year? And we'll see if that goes back up or not. I love everything about this offense from a fantasy perspective. They have a ground game with Joe Mixon that's good enough. They have a bunch of targets, like you said, and Joe Burrow is as good as they come. It's just how consistent do you think Jamar Chase is going to be? I think he's going to have a bounce back year this year. I think if he had been healthy, he missed 4 games last year. If he had just played and done his average in those games, I think he would be a lot higher on people's lists. So I'm going to have
he's a wide receiver 2 on people's lists right now because ADP. So he's only going after Justin Jefferson. Yep. But like I said, last year, I was just looking at points per game. He was a wide receiver 4. Yeah, I do think there's one guy on here that I'm really risking it, right? Because I actually like this guy more than Jamar Chase this upcoming year. You can end up getting both though, because you don't have to take this other one this early. But this is my big risky one right now for PPR leagues. I'm going to get that.
Number 5.
All right. Number 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions. He had 106 receptions last year, 5th most among wide receivers. And that was being injured from weeks 4 through 7 and playing very, very limited snaps. So he missed 1 game during that time. And the other games he came back, he was playing less than 30% of the snaps of the game. And he still put up the 5th most receptions among wide receivers. He's had 196 career receptions throughout his first 2 seasons, which is tied for the most in NFL history among all players in their first 2 seasons, tied with Justin Jefferson and Michael Thomas. Now, he doesn't get the glory like those other 2 guys do because Justin Jefferson's putting up way more yards per reception, so that's true. But in fantasy, a reception's a reception. I'm going to take it, and I am fine with that. And he does have the capability to be used deeper down the field to get those yards after catch. I think he's super talented. But you have DJ Chark gone now. You have TJ Hawkinson gone now. DeAndre Swift gone now, which I do like Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's still a rookie. We don't know how he'll be. And Jamison Williams, who we thought was going to step in and maybe compete for that wide receiver 1 role, or at least be a viable wide receiver 2, is now suspended the first 6 games. So it's Amon-Ra St. Brown and pretty much nobody else at wide receiver or tight end position. I do love me some Sam Laporta, but rookie tight ends, I cannot, be too high on. And over Amon-Ra St. Brown's last 20 career games in which he played 25 snaps, which is not a high threshold here. I'm just saying that he, actually played the game. He has averaged 20.6 PPR points per game. He has been elite. He has been absolutely elite as long as he's healthy and playing the full game or playing half of a game even. So Jared Goff's still there. That's his dude. I absolutely love him this year.
I think it too, when you look back last year in week 5 against the Patriots, he had 4 catches for 18 yards. And then against Dallas the next week, 1 catch for 4 yards. But other than that, his floor was pretty high. His lowest game.
That was when he was injured. So he missed week 4. He clearly came back and was not back.
His worst game since then is the final game of the year against Green Bay, and it was 6 for 49. So that's, if that's your worst game when you're healthy, that's a pretty consistent thing. It is crazy when you look back at his draft class, right? In a draft class that had Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle in it, Amon-Ra St. Brown has more catches than anybody in that draft class. It's wild, but I get why he's here. It's bold to have him above Jamar Chase. But
now, if you're in a standard league where you don't get any points per reception, that moves Amon-Ra down quite a bit. And I'm taking guys like Jamar Chase, like Adams, like AJ Brown over him, at least those three guys, because they scored touchdowns consistently. That's something Amon-Ra hasn't really done too much. Well, I mean, he's only in his second season, but I do like they're going to need him this year. Jamal Williams stole 18 rushing touchdowns last year?
He had more rushing attempts, I think, inside the 5-yard line than anybody in the last 30 years.
Yeah, I can't imagine they score as many rushing touchdowns as they did last year. They're going to have to throw more, which should give more opportunities to Monroe to score more touchdowns.
I have no problem saying he'll put up just as many catches and yards as he did last year. I don't know if he's going to have any more touchdowns. I'm not as high on the Lions as everybody else. I feel like we're all freaking out because they weren't a losing team last year. They were one game over 500. One game.
Yes, but they won 7 of their last 8 games. Like you keep ignoring that part.
How does that count more than what happened earlier in the year?
Because it's a good indicator of what they're going to do the next year.
No, it's not. Years don't carry over.
If you get better over a year, it's normally a pretty good indicator that you're going to.
No way.
Yes.
Just because you win games at the end of the year doesn't mean all of a sudden now you're going to be good next year. What if you?
It has a. Yes, it does sometimes. I'm not saying every single time, but if you see the team grow, especially with the amount of times the Lions lost by like this much, if like in the beginning of the season.
That's the league, man.
Yes, it changes. But that changes every single year. We see the teams get lucky with the bounces, the teams not get lucky with the bounces. Like last year, the 49ers could not have been luckier with every single bounce went their way. Every time I was like, wow, they are so incredibly lucky. We talked about that all last year, how lucky they were getting. And that could change next year. And that's something to worry about, where anytime someone fumbled, the ball would bounce right back into their lap. Or if another team fumbled, they would bounce right into the 49ers lap. Or it was a lot of luck last year.
So the Lions are really good and they just got really unlucky, but the 49ers are not that good. They just got really lucky.
49ers are great. I'm just saying from year to year, the bounce of the ball can change.
Oh, it absolutely can. I think the reason they lost those games early in the year is because I think Dan Campbell stinks as a head coach. I don't think he's any good. I think if he wasn't so good behind a microphone, people would not be slurping Dan Campbell as much as they are.
I'm with you there.
Who's he out coaching? Honestly, who is Dan Campbell outsmarting as a head coach?
I would run through a wall for him. So it's weird he's not a good coach. But I mean, I don't know. We don't know yet.
Mike Singletary gave good speeches too. He wasn't a good coach for the 49ers either. All right. Number 4.
All right. It's Stefan Diggs of the Bills, as long as he's cool and is back. He said everything was overblown. So hopefully it's just chill, because the Bills really, really need Stefan Diggs. I mean, without him, there's nobody else. But wide receiver 5 fantasy points per game last season, wide receiver 7 in 2021, wide receiver 3 in 2020. So every year with the Bills, he's just been great. But what I love to see is the consistency with his number of targets. That has not changed. It's 164, 164, 154. And it's just, he's the number 1 guy there. He's going to get all of his targets. They haven't added anybody else still somehow. I don't know how they made it another offseason without adding a more reliable wide receiver 2. Now DeAndre Hopkins is still out there, and that would change things, but
that would be awesome.
That would be pretty freaking cool. But right now it's just Gabe Davis, who, he's fun and all when he makes his big plays, but I think last year was his chance to prove that he was worthy of being a wide receiver 2 in the league, and he didn't quite hit that mark. So it's still just Stefan Diggs and not a lot else. But the only reason that Diggs fell to wide receiver 7 in 2021 was because of his catch percentage being so freaking low. And I talked about this last year on this podcast at this time. It was 63% in 2021, when his average in his career has always sat around 70. So that's why we knew that was going to increase. It has to go back to the average. And that's what it did. It went right back to 70.1 last year. And he was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy points per game and had a much better season overall when it came to receiving yards. He had over 200 more receiving yards while actually having 10 fewer targets from 2021. So with all that said, I think like there's no reason to predict his catch percentage will fall down again. He still is Josh Allen. He's still the wide receiver one. He's like the safest wide receiver I think you can draft.
I love everything about Stefan Diggs on paper, right? Since he's gotten to Buffalo, he's got more catches than any receiver in the league over the last 3 years. And only Devonta Adams has accounted for a higher percentage of his team's receiving yards than Stefan Diggs. Everything you said is good. And you throw in the fact that Josh Allen got hurt last year. He hurt his UCL, the same thing that Brock Purdy hurt. And that clearly affected Josh Allen, which obviously impacts Stefan Diggs and all the other wide receivers. But
I mean, you have the numbers up right now. His numbers once Josh Allen got hurt, Stefan Diggs' numbers go completely down. He was dominating the league before that. So I may have him too low, but I can't. These top three guys are just too good to consider Stefan Diggs over. But
he had
Stefan
at least
Diggs is like the safest.
Diggs had at least 100 yards in 5 out of the first 7 games of the season last year before Josh Allen got hurt. But here's the thing that scares me with him is what the hell's going on with him and the Bills. Sean McDermott immediately when Diggs wasn't there said he was very concerned. Then the next day he says, oh, I'm not actually concerned. But yet they're trying to make it like Diggs went AWOL and he's saying that's not true at all. And Josh Allen even admitted that they sent Diggs home. He didn't just bail on the team. Something is up with them. And I don't know why, but something stinks in Buffalo. And I don't know where it could possibly, like, what's Diggs' beef? You're seeing the ball more than anybody else, dude. Like, what is the problem? We know that he left Minnesota because he was unhappy there. And, I just start to wonder, like, if everywhere you go, it smells like shit, check your shoes, dude. Maybe it's you.
Yeah. And you would almost feel better if you were like, oh, well, he just wants money. Because you're like, okay, just give him that contract extension then. But he just got his money last year. So it is very, very confusing that we don't know what's really going on. And it always seemed like Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs were like best buds. So did something happen there? Like, what is happening? And that is a worry. But hopefully by the time we have to draft, we have an understanding of where they're at. Hopefully he's been at training camp the whole time. Like if he's at training camp and participating, then he'll be fine.
I don't like it. And I don't like Josh Allen blaming the media for it. Like it's somehow the media's fault that the head coach said he's very concerned. And it's somehow the media's fault that Diggs was there and then went home. Like we didn't make any of that stuff up. Those are things that happened. We just talked about it. I hate when players blame the media for stuff. It drives me crazy. So I hope they get it straightened out because like you said, there's really not anybody else in Buffalo. I know they drafted Dalton Kincaid, but like he's a tight end. He's coming in as a rookie. He's probably not going to be a massive contributor in year one. So they need him on offense. And they're, a team that expects to be in the Super Bowl this year in the AFC. And if they don't have Diggs, forget it.
Oh, I mean, they don't have anyone then. Josh Allen's great, but he can't. No one's winning. I guess Patrick Mahomes just won a Super Bowl with very limited wide receiver options, but he had Travis Kelce. That's the difference. Josh Allen doesn't have a Travis Kelce yet. They did draft Dalton Kincaid. He's not going to be Travis Kelce in year one or probably ever. There would be nobody for Josh Allen.
Waveware says it was their last game, I think. Diggs was yelling at Allen on the sideline and apparently still going on. Are you giving up or something to that effect? I do remember Diggs yelling at him on the sideline, but I also like guys yell at each other during games. There's clips of Peyton Manning tearing his offensive line to shreds during games. Like sometimes, you're in the heat of the moment, guys yell at each other. It's not a thing that sticks sometimes. Now, maybe sometimes it is, but usually it's like everybody kind of gets like, all right, we're in the game. Like what's said on the sideline stays on the sidelines.
It did kind of feel like the Bills didn't have the same heart they normally play with during that game. Something felt off.
I got to rewatch it. I'd like to rewatch it to see how I feel. I don't remember how I felt at the time, but I'm not saying you're wrong.
Because I always love Josh Allen and the Bills for that reason. They play with so much heart and it's so much fun. Like it just kind of reminds me of college football in that way where it's like Josh Allen will like freaking die for this win. He did not seem like that during that game. Something was off.
No, I don't know. I want to rewatch it. Now you got me curious. All right, number 3.
All right, I'm going with Cooper Kupp of the Rams. I wanted to put him number 1. I should have. Because you know what? like someone said, these are my rankings. Why did I do it? The only reason I'm not is because the Rams were such a dumpster fire last year. And their offensive line is not really anything improved. And it just seems like they might even be a worse dumpster fire this year with the losses they had. I don't know if I could trust him getting through this full season or being good for a full season, but he was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game last year. Like, yeah, he only played half the year, but in those games, he scored the most out of anyone else per game. Wide receiver 1 in 2021 by a gazillion. Like, no one was even close to him. He was one of 4 wide receivers last season with 5 games of 25 plus fantasy points. The only other guys were Justin Jefferson, Devonta Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp, which Hill had 6 games, Adams had 7, Jefferson had 9, and Kupp had 5. But Kupp played 9 games. And in his last game, he played with John Wolford and had -3 receiving yards. So like he literally played pretty much 8 games all of last season. And 5 of those games had over 25 plus fantasy points. And 2 of the games had over 30 fantasy points. Only Justin Jefferson and Devonta Adams had more such games last year. And like Cooper Kupp did this barely playing. It's still Matthew Stafford there. He's still the wide receiver 1. Like no one else is going to compete. He's going to get all the targets. If he's healthy on the field, he's playing and Matthew Stafford is there, he's probably going to be the wide receiver 1 again. Like that's it.
Yeah, it comes down to what's your confidence that he'll stay healthy and that Stafford will stay healthy. Because if they're both there, they're going to produce. We know Sean McVay can get the ball to anybody he wants to get it to. I get very scared with the guy that has had some health issues. I don't know what the hell is even going on with Matthew Stafford. That's kind of a scary injury with him, but he says he's going to play. And LaFleur is there. Mike LaFleur is there coming over from the Jets. He was the Jets OC. He was with McVay back in the day. Now they're together again. So I think their offense will be better than it was last year. If you want to roll those dice, I could see it. I'm surprised you have him at number 3 because I do think that's a big gamble to take. But if you just look at the production from when he was healthy, you're right. He's up there with anybody.
I mean, it's just he doesn't have any bad weeks. He had that like the last game he played in which he got injured. Yes, he had -1 receiving yards on 3 receptions, but that was with John Wolford. Like I'm just not
right.
The worst game besides that, he had a 16 fantasy point game and a 16 fantasy point game. Those were his worst games last year. The others 31, 32, 26, 26, 23, 27. Absurd. Like, and this is what he did the year prior too. It's not just like, oh, we had a half of season to this. He was dominating every single game. And it all comes down to really like Cooper Kupp should be okay, right? Like he had his injury. There's no reason to assume he's going to get another injury. It does come down to Matthew Stafford's back. That's the one that's like, can he make it through a season? And if the Rams are losing games, does he even want to make it through a full season?
Right. I feel like he kind of shut it down last year.
Yeah.
And
so did Cooper Kupp. He could have came back, I feel like, at some point.
Yeah.
There was a chance for that. I feel like if they were actually making a playoff run or going to the, actually made the playoffs, I do feel like he probably would have pushed himself back. But there was no point to. And that's your biggest worry with guys that are on bad teams. It's like if they sustain an injury and their team sucks, they might not come back.
Shut it down, yeah. Why have Kupp ahead of Diggs? Because Diggs is very consistent also, and there's less health scare there.
Because Diggs doesn't put up 30-point games consistently like Cooper Kupp does. Like the upside is higher with Cooper Kupp, and the floor is just the same. Like Cooper Kupp doesn't have bad games. I know Stefan Diggs has very few bad games as well, even though at the end of last year he did, but that was with Josh Allen being injured. But the upside with Cooper Kupp is just so much greater, especially like even when it comes to touchdowns, not even just receiving yards.
Okay. I could buy that. Higher highs is a good justification as any. Number 2.
All right. Justin Jefferson of the Vikings.
Ooh.
He's not number 1. He's number 2. So he was the wide receiver 1 last year overall, wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game behind Cooper Kupp. But he only played 9 games. It's not completely fair to compare the two when one played 17 and one played 9. He had 9 games with 25 plus fantasy points, most in the NFL. Only 2 other wide receivers had 5 such games. I already mentioned that was Adams and Tyreek Hill. Adams had 7. Hill had 6. Now, they did add Jordan Addison in the first round of the draft. They added TJ Hawkinson late last year, and he was getting a ton of targets immediately. And then they added KJ Osborne. They didn't add KJ Osborne, but he's still there and he's going to be involved. Justin Jefferson's going to be the clear-cut wide receiver one. He's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to be absolutely amazing. But I do at the same time think they were leaning on Justin Jefferson too much at times last year. And it became really hard for them at the end of games when they needed to go down and drive and score. And their only guy was Justin Jefferson, which he's so good, but defenses can shut you down. So I think that is why they went to go get Jordan Addison. So when defenses do focus in on shutting down Justin Jefferson, they have another guy to go to. Kirk Cousins doesn't have to try to force the ball into. So I could see his targets decreasing just a little bit there. And I really like TJ Hawkinson this year. For a tight end to switch teams in the middle of the year and get the target share he did was really impressive. So I do think he's used heavily. And whatever reason, at the end of last year, Justin Jefferson disappeared. That does scare me slightly. Like even including the playoff game, if I remember correctly, he didn't go off. But his last two games in the regular season and then his playoff game, it was like, what happened to him? It's like the defenses just completely just take him out. And is that what they're going to do moving forward? I don't think that's going to last, but that did worry me a little bit.
Yeah, week 16, 1 catch for 15 yards. Week 17, 4 catches for 38 yards. Those are your championship weeks, too. You need Justin Jefferson to produce. But the guy
then in the playoffs, 7 receptions for 47 yards. That's 3 straight games where you're like, what happened? Because what we know of, he wasn't injured. And these are huge games for the Vikings. And defenses clearly figured out at that moment, okay, this is how we can shut him down. It doesn't mean that they're going to do that next year, but that is why he's wide receiver 2 instead of wide receiver 1 with another guy. I feel a little bit more confident that he'll get his targets and that he's just unstoppable.
Justin Jefferson is on the Jerry Rice track. He's freaking phenomenal. He's an absolute monster. 128 catches last year for 1,800 yards. It's like just
184 targets though. That's not sustainable typically for guys. They don't just get that year after year after year.
Well, so far he has. He started out with 88, then he got 108, then he got 128 last year. He's never had lower than 1,400 yards in a season, which is an incredible statistic. I love everything about him. He's absolutely fantastic, except Kirk Cousins is his quarterback. That's the only thing I don't love, although Kirk Cousins
is great.
He's solid at least. He's going to throw for 4,000 yards, and Justin Jefferson's going to have a good chunk of that. All right, so that means that your wide receiver 1, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, has to be Tyreek Hill?
It is. Yes, it's Tyreek Hill. He was a wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game last year behind Jefferson and behind Cooper Kupp, if we're counting his 9 games. But the thing is, he had to deal with some craziness at the quarterback position. So when he was with Tua, absolutely amazing. When he had a couple fine games with Teddy Bridgewater. And then who is the quarterback that came in later on in the year that played the playoff game?
I just had his name in my head and then it popped back out again, but it was nobody good.
Yeah, it was nobody good. But the games he played with Tua, and that Tua made it through the full game. That was only 9 games last year that Tua made it through the full game without getting injured, without having to leave, without missing time. Or without just actually missing the full game. But in those 9 games, he got to play with Tua for a full game. 120 receiving yards per game he averaged. He averaged 25 fantasy points per game, which is well ahead of what Justin Jefferson averaged last year. These are his receiving longs in the games that he played with Tua. 60, 42, 45, 60, 52, 39. His receiving, he's a monster. These are his worst receiving game in a game that he played fully with Tua was 69 yards. That's his worst one. And he had 9 receptions and a touchdown in that game. The other games, 94, 190, 72, 188, 143, 146, 81, 103. Just dominant. Now, Tua might not stay healthy. That's true. But I'm going to take that risk with Tyreek Hill just being such a freaking monster and just dominates.
And Mike McDaniel is there. So he's going to get him the ball. He's going to be able to get him the ball in space, which obviously lets him use that speed. By the way, Skylar Thompson was the third quarterback last year for the Dolphins. Now they have Mike White there. So if you're not confident in Tua to stay healthy, Mike White had some decent games for the Jets.
Garrett Wilson had decent games with Mike White. But also, I think I didn't mention a big difference between Hill and Jefferson is with Tyreek Hill, it's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and not a single other person on that roster that should be getting too many targets. Like, really not at all. Like, it goes to those two guys, which means you should also really like Jalen Waddle this year. But he averaged over 11 targets per game in those 9 games with Tua. Over 11 targets per game. Why would that change when there's nobody else to throw the ball to?
The only thing I don't love about Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, and maybe this was just a fluke thing from last year, they both only had one game with multiple touchdowns all season long. Just one. Justin Jefferson's actually came in week 1, and then he never had another game all year with multiple touchdowns. Tyreek Hill only had one game with multiple touchdowns. Now, again, maybe that was because of the quarterback thing. That's totally legitimate. Just a weird quirk. And, I just hate that you could have a guy that has 10 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown, and then you could have some other guy that catches 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns with like 60 yards and end up having a better day. I hate that, but what can you do? Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 1. So to recap your list, you have, hold on, let me take the graphic off. I can't do that when I have them there. CeeDee Lamb, number 10. Garrett Wilson, number 9. A.J. Brown, 8. Devonta Adams, 7. Jamar Chase, 6. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 5. That's the most controversial, clearly. Stefan Diggs, 4. Cooper Kupp, 3. Justin Jefferson, 2. And Tyreek Hill at number 1. Who was your first out? Who was number 11?
Oh, goodness. I don't have that. I don't have that available. But it would probably be a guy like Chris Olave. What?
Sign me too, says where's Juwan Jennings on your list? Well done. Well done. Everyone knows Michelle hates Juwan Jennings unnecessarily. Great question. Sign me 2-9.
It would probably be about, 300th, 400th on my list. Somewhere down there. That might be a little too high for him.
Would you have considered Debo or Brandon Ayuk as potentially number 11?
No, it would have gone to a guy like Chris Olave or Jalen Waddle. I think they'll have really nice seasons. But I did remember I wanted to talk about my favorite later round wide receiver pick.
How late are we talking?
It's probably he's going right now in 8th, 9th round. Maybe that increases as we get through the offseason. He's a Commanders wide receiver, not named Terry McLaurin. Do you want to take a guess?
Johan Dotson.
Good job. You did get it.
Oh, you'll never get it. You didn't know this guy.
I wasn't going to give you the team. I said you wouldn't. Would you have guessed his name in the first 20 names?
If you didn't give me the team,
no.
It would have been close to 20. It wouldn't have been top of mind. He wouldn't have been my guess if you didn't give me the team. But come on, give me a little credit. You didn't even think I knew his name.
I just said you might not, but you did a good job. Good job.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Johan Dotson. He's going into his 2nd year. And typically, this is my issue with where Johan Dotson's being drafted. He's going as the wide receiver 41. He's going as a 94th overall player. And typically, when guys are coming into their 2nd year, they get all the buzz, they get all the hype, and they are drafted too early. And we're seeing that this year. We don't know if they're getting drafted too early, but I mean, look at these 2nd-year wide receivers with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and even guys like Christian Watson is going like wide receiver 19. And you got Treylon Burks going higher than Johan Dotson. If Jamison Williams wasn't suspended, he would have been going high. Like, these guys get the hype and get drafted high. And for some reason with Johan Dotson, he's not. I think mostly due to Sam Howell, but I'm not as worried about it as others. But last season, he only played 12 games because he dealt with that hamstring injury in the middle of the season, which is unfortunate for a rookie. But he's had in those 12 games, he had 5 games with 16 plus fantasy points. That was tied for the 2nd most among rookies, behind only Garrett Wilson, who had 6 such games. So he only had 1 more such game than Johan Dotson did, and he played 17 games while Dotson played 12 games, to compare to other guys in the past. Like Jamar Chase had a freaky amazing rookie season. He had 7 games with 16 plus fantasy points in his rookie season and 17 games played. Again, Dotson had 5. So he started off the year great. Johan Dotson did. He put up 16 plus fantasy points in week 1 and 2. He had a bad week 3, got hurt in week 4, missed weeks 5 through 9 with that hamstring injury. Took a bit to come back. Like, it wasn't pretty, but then in 3 of his last 5 games, he put up 16 plus fantasy points. So it was nice to see him out there and looking like himself from the beginning of the year again. And we saw a game with Sam Howell, and that's when Dotson put up over 70 yards. He had 3 receptions for 72 yards. He had no, that was Terry McLaurin. Sorry. I was thinking of that long catch. But he also had over 70 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games. I'm not saying Johan Dotson's going to be amazing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he has just as good of a chance to be a second-year breakout as any of these other guys do. And they're all going so much higher, getting all the hype. And for some reason, Johan Dotson is not. So instead of reaching on a guy like Christian Watson, just wait on Johan Dotson, who I think has just the same ability of breaking out. He's super talented. He was also a early first-round draft pick last year. And I'm not worried about Sam Howell. He's he has a big arm. He could throw. He can hit guys. Like, Sam Howell is going to get the ball into the right spot. I'm not worried about that.
And you don't know how Christian Watson's going to look without Aaron Rodgers there. I know that Washington hasn't had a good quarterback, and Dotson still put up decent production. So that's more reassuring from that perspective, because I don't know what the hell to think about Jordan Love. So I guess that could give you some comfort. I don't generally like to have any Washington players on my team because that franchise has been such a dumpster fire for most of my life.
Yeah, but Terry McLaurin's been pretty good.
He has been. True. Not on my teams, though. I never draft him.
Yeah. Well, but he also goes pretty high for his name and what he did as a rookie. So, like, that's what I'm saying again. Like, Johan Dotson could have just as good of a season as Terry McLaurin, if not better. I mean, they did draft Dotson in the middle of the first round. So they do expect him to be heavily involved. There's no reason that he couldn't take over as a wide receiver 1, have a better season. And everyone's just ignoring his potential.
I like it. I like that. It's a very good sleeper pick. There's no reason. I mean, Terry McLaurin's been good, but not like amazing. He's given you like 1,100 yards, 7-8 touchdowns, which is a fine season. But that's like a Brandon Cooks year, basically, more or less. It's not like he's like this untouchable wide receiver 1. I wouldn't mind seeing some good things happen for that franchise, too, now that Daniel Snyder is going to be gone, hopefully in about, 13 days, 2 weeks, basically, hopefully, and then they'll finally vote him out. So I like that as a good sleeper pick for you. You continue to disrespect the 49ers wide receivers. That's fine. I'm sure that people out there will forgive you.
I had Debo low in my rankings. Remember, I had him at like wide receiver 9, and you guys did not like that.
But and he had a terrible year. And by his own admission, a terrible year.
This is the thing is, wide receiver rankings are so hard because, as I said, it's really, really hard to justify not putting these elite wide receivers in the top 10. But at the same time, the leaderboard doesn't look the same from year to year to year. So, like, me having all these elite wide receivers in the top 10, one, too many, multiple of them could disappoint next year. Something could change. Some quarterback could be injured, or just they're not getting the same targets as they typically do, or just whatever could happen. So that's like the hardest part with ranking wide receivers.
I feel like it's like that every year. When I was younger, I feel like you could count on the same people year after year to be on top of the totals. And now it's like totally random. I'm trying to look. So the last guy to lead the league in receptions 2 years in a row was Michael Thomas, 2018, 2019, which, by the way, that feels like a billion years ago. Is that guy even like still playing? Did he retire?
He's supposed to be this year with the Saints.
I wouldn't draft him with somebody else's team. The last person to lead the league in receiving yards 2 years ago, or back-to-back years, I should say. Oh my God, we got to go way back. Is this true? I can't even believe this. It's been a while. Let's just say that. I can't even find it yet. I don't know. It's been a while. So it's dicey. There's an element of risk and chance and all of that in these rankings. So I get you being bold. I like it.
I wasn't even that bold. That's what I don't like.
What would you like? Johan Dotson, wide receiver 1?
No, but I don't know. Like, I just know that, yes, Stefan Diggs and Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase and AJ Brown and Devonta Adams, they should all be in the top 10. It's just not as fun when you just have that many elite people that you just know should be in the top 10.
Let me ask you this. Would you rather have or who puts up better numbers? Let's just say that. Wide receiver 1, so in this case, Tyreek Hill, because he was your wide receiver 1, or Travis Kelce, tight end 1.
Oh my goodness.
Right? It's tough.
And when it comes to Tyreek Hill compared to, an Amon-Ra St. Brown, like wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 5, it might not be all that different. But when you're comparing Travis Kelce, tight end 1, putting up top wide receiver numbers, and tight end 5 or even tight end 3, it's a massive, massive difference. So I love your point. You're saying take Travis Kelce over any of these guys.
Well, I was just wondering, like, let's say you're on the clock and you could either have no wide receivers have been taken and Travis Kelce's on the board. You're saying take Travis Kelce because the difference is not going to be that big. And the difference in Kelce versus other tight ends is huge.
Yeah.
By the way, Calvin Johnson was the last guy to lead the league in receiving yards in back-to-back years in 2011, 2012.
So it wasn't as far back as you thought.
No, I was looking at the wrong thing. But still, the fact that it's only happened, one time in the last 10 years is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
All right. That's our show. Top 10
it.
wide receivers officially in the book. So we have done quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Next week, we're doing tight ends. And then the week after that, we're in
You're going to make me do 10 tight ends?
Yes.
10 tight ends?
Which part of that?
There's not even 10 good tight ends in the NFL.
That's the point, though. People out there are going to get stuck with some of these bad tight ends. And then
I guess it'll be a lot more useful than telling you that Justin Jefferson is good.
There you go. See, you poo-pooed it, and now you're on my side, and I had to do
but it's a lot. It's going to be hard for me. Goodness gracious, a lot of work.
Sorry, this is why we pay you the big bucks.
Oh, yeah.
But we're through it now. We're going to do tight ends next week, and then we're into training camp because the rookies report on July 18th, and then the vets report the week after that. So we'll do tight ends, and then bam, we're in it. I love it.
What's the number one thing you're anticipating for training camp? Like all you want to know the
first
day?
Quarterback battle.
Who's starting?
How much is Brock there? What is he doing? Because, maybe he's going to be throwing it around a little bit. I don't know. So I'm interested to see what they do with that because I'm worried that they're going to rush him back too quickly. So I'm interested to see how much they have him doing. And then if he's not there, what is it with Trey and Sam and how does Trey look? That's my number one thing. There's other stuff I fully admit. Okay. Before everyone shouts me down, there's other stuff and we will talk about that other stuff. But the most important thing to me is the quarterback stuff. And that's what I'm going to be watching.
Oh yeah. For sure. I mean, how could it be anything else? If anyone says anything else, they're just lying, trying to come up with something else.
Right. It's clearly the most important.
We're not getting kicker rankings. You're lucky you're getting tight end rankings.
Sign me 29 says they want kicker rankings. That's fantastic. Michelle doesn't even play with kickers in her league. She doesn't play with kickers. I
would do defensive rankings before I would do kicker rankings.
She's a serious fantasy player. You want to hear a crazy stat for kickers?
Sure.
Justin Tucker has never been the highest scoring kicker in any season of his career. And he's universally acknowledged as the best kicker. Isn't that weird?
That is very weird.
Maybe
the Ravens scored too many points or not. I don't know. Maybe every time they get to the red zone, they score.
I mean, I know you don't want to talk about this, but if you're going for a kicker, don't pick the kicker with a good offense. You want a kicker with an offense that's good enough to move down the field, but not good
enough. Mediocre offense.
Yeah. Really, what you want is the 49ers kicker. For years, they were fantastic because the offense had no problem going down the field, and then they would always stall out in the red zone. That's really what you want for your kicker. I think
that's why Graham Gano was so good last year because the Giants were that exact team. Like they were decent enough, but not good, great. It was perfect.
Why? I have noticed that basically playing with a kicker now is now an anomaly. The norm is no more kickers. Why did we just get rid of kickers?
Because there's no so for so much of fantasy, it is random at times, but there's ways that you can predict certain things to happen, or at least research about it, or at least have some idea what might happen and make it an intellectual prediction, right? There's actual measurements behind them why these guys should be good or bad. With kickers, it's completely random. And you can lose a huge game in fantasy because one kicker scores 25 points in one game that it just happened to be that that team stalled out in this perfect spot over and over and over again. It could be nothing even special that the kicker does. Like he makes a bunch of 26-yard field goals, but he happens to get to kick 5 of them. Like it's just like it's not, and it's so random. Kickers, you cannot predict who's going to have a good kicking game. You just can't. Like you just said, Justin Tucker, the best kicker in the league, never even finished number 1. Like it's just too random.
You're saying it's more random than the randomness that happens with other players, because there are weeks where some dude just randomly has like 3 receiving touchdowns. You're saying it's even more random than that.
Yes.
Okay. I guess that just seems weird to me. To me, there's always an element of we don't know what these guys are going to do. Yet for some reason, we don't tolerate that with kickers, but we tolerate it with everybody else. That seems weird to me.
Because there's just more data behind the other guys, and there's actually ways to somewhat predict what they're going to do. And there's just none of that with kickers.
I feel like there has been a definite shift, not only in fantasy, but especially with like analytics and stuff. Fans value and they look to like what they think should happen. This should have happened. Well, this kicker shouldn't have had as good of a day as he did. Like, and they get really caught up on that in that, as opposed to like what actually happens. That does frustrate me a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. I just think with kickers, you could just put in, I don't know, like there's just nothing behind it. And like just because your kicker didn't get a chance to kick that day, but another, like with all these other players, they always get a chance to be on the field to show what they can do. I mean, as long as they're healthy. Some of these times it's kickers never even get the chance to kick a field goal because they just happen to play that way in that game. And it's not always what happens in those games, but they just never had a chance to run out there. It's like, okay, my guy didn't even touch the field and your guy just happened to get out there 10 times. Like that's just not a thing that you can predict, and not I know it's not all fair in fantasy, but that's just one thing. When you're starting a guy, you expect him to be on the field, right? And if they're not on the field, that sucks.
And what about defenses? Defenses, you can't say that about.
Yeah, you can. I play with defense.
You do?
Yeah, their defense is always on the field. They always have a chance.
Well, then why aren't we doing top 10 defenses?
Because I don't want to.
All right, you know what? That's an honest answer. You'll always get an authenticity here on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Network wherever you get your audio podcasts, and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We just went over 4,000 subscribers, Michelle. I'm super pumped about it. We had a ton of people come over right in February during the playoffs when, after I had gotten laid off. And now I really appreciate everybody climbing on board. People are seeing what we're doing. You're seeing the consistency. We're always there, all the live shows, and we're so grateful for your support. Hop on board now because there is going to be plenty more coming once the season starts. Have a good weekend, everybody. Michelle, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Hope you have a mimosa in hand.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll talk to you next week.
Bye, y'all.